So there have been a few releases in the last few years that have caught my attention, some of which were still in development while others have been out for a while now. I finally had some time to play some of these games and I wanted to put out some thoughts and a thorough review to give you an idea if any of these games are worth your time. To kick things off, I am starting with the game Remnant 2, which was actually released in July of 2023 and is a sequel to the game Remnant from the Ashes, which I never played or heard of. This game is available on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, as well as PC through Steam, which is where I got it. So with that said, let's get into it. This game was the first Souls-like game that I tried, and to be honest, you need to be living under a rock to not really know what Souls-like means. When you look at a game and you see that it is related to the Souls-like genre, it usually means that it is challenging. Not to say that other games can't be challenging in their own ways, but the Souls-like genre aren't just stat checks, and Remnant 2 definitely doesn't feel that way, at least at first. There were some instances that it definitely felt like there was a stat check and I was in the wrong spot during my first playthrough, but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. For Remnant 2, I bought the base game with all 3 DLCs, which are the Awakened Kingdom, the Forgotten Kingdom, and the Dark Horizon, and the entire set cost me a little over $40. The game has 3 primary worlds with 2 secondary worlds that you will traverse. In addition to this, each of the 3 primary worlds has 3 storylines associated with them, so 9 total stories across these 3 worlds. They are also procedurally generated, which means that they get a random mix of what the community calls tile sets. I'm not sure if that's an industry term or just what they call it here, but those tile sets have additional events that will or won't spawn depending on the injectables of your role. In short, the game is very random in its style, which gives high amounts of replayability. It has 3 difficulty settings up front with a 4th harder difficulty setting that gets unlocked after you beat the campaign on any difficulty. There's also a primary story associated with the game despite all of the randomness, and I think it fits in well with this style of game, but I'll discuss that a little bit more later. Let's start with the basics. After the tutorial starting area, you find Word 13 and are asked to choose what is referred to as an archetype. These archetypes are essentially the classes in the game. All of them more or less utilize your guns, but have a special trait associated with them and also what is called a prime perk. On game start, only 4 will be available, but you will find items in the various worlds to unlock the others. In total, there are 14 more, and once unlocked, a new character can be made to use any of those. You can also mix and match these archetypes at will after you play the game a bit, so there's no reason to not unlock them and try them all out. The archetypes in no particular order are the Summoner, the Explorer, the Challenger, the Alchemist, the Gunslinger, the Engineer, the Hunter, the Invader, the Medic, the Handler, the Archon, the Ritualist, the Invoker, and the Warden. While some of these are more focused on co-op and group play, and others are more focused on single player style and a very specific style of gameplay. You have 2 guns, you have 1 sidearm and 1 long gun, which have their respective slots, and you also have a melee weapon. There are a variety of items that can go here, from machine guns to shotguns to bows to brass knuckles, and they all each have their uses, and none of them are really particularly better or worse than anything else. Some just fit your build well, while others don't. And playing through it, at least in a single player casual experience, it doesn't really feel like you need to min-max to enjoy the game. You don't need to come up with this elaborate build just to beat one boss. Just find a gun that you think works for you and run it with your build and you're good. With all of that out of the way, let's talk about the gameplay loop. Remnant 2 is a game about traversing different worlds through what is called a world stone, and the initial starting world of any given campaign is random. It can be any 3 of the starting worlds with any 3 of the storylines. Since I had the DLC, my first ever campaign was the Nightweaver storyline, followed by the Alepsis Tora storyline, and then the Lydusa storyline. And all 3 of these were amazing, even though I didn't consume every bit of dialogue along the way or find every secret the first time around. I felt very satisfied with the difficulty and learning curve among these 3 storylines. My first playthrough, I chose the Challenger class on Survivor difficulty, which is the easiest setting and the most tanky class to play. Though easy isn't really easy in this game, if you were to choose a harder difficulty setting from jump, you would have a significantly harder time considering the boss weapons, the open world drops, and rings are kind of randomized, so there's no guarantee you will get a polished build off of your first playthrough. Outside of the 3 main worlds, there are 2 other locations, and one of them is Root Earth, which is the final stage, and that is static, and then the Labyrinth, which is right after you beat the first section. These are always the same, they're not randomized, and they're just as interesting and visually captivating as the rest of the game, but I thought I should mention that these areas do also exist in the campaign. Additionally, once you beat your first step of your campaign, you can go into the world settings at Ward 13 and roll what is called Adventure Mode. What this does is it keeps your primary campaign the same and lets you roll an individual map for a different story or location. This is the best way to roll for the various alternative stories, and if you are just playing through the story and you want to consume all the different side stories, you don't need to keep running the campaign over and over and keep replaying the same ones. You can keep rolling adventure mode until you see, oh, I haven't been here before, let me go check it out. There also is a boss rush mode in the world settings, and this just stacks up the bosses in the game. So if you are just looking for trying out different builds, or you want to just fight the bosses without going through the dungeons and exploring and stuff, you can spin up boss rush mode to do just that, just trying different difficulties, trying different encounters with different builds. So there is a lot of ways to interact with this game, whether it's just spinning up one-off storylines for about an hour to an hour and a half playtime, or just running the gauntlet of bosses until you die. Survivor difficulty is plenty to keep you engaged without feeling that things are really too easy. You can still definitely die in Survivor if you aren't running some crazy min-max build. And there is some vertical progression with the different archetypes, and with the game's release about a year and a half ago, the Remnant community has done a good job of uncovering almost everything there is to uncover. So if you ever get stuck or you want to know more about a location or what secrets are available, there are plenty of resources available. And I've consumed quite a bit of Remnant 2 secrets and where to unlock X, Y, and Z here on YouTube. Some of the secrets are straightforward and I just found them just by wandering, while others are really intentionally complicated. At the time of recording, I've played maybe a total of 5 or 6 of the available stories, and I look forward to playing through the rest of them. There is both public and friends-only co-op up to 3 people, and I did play with some randoms here and there, which was an okay experience, and I'll talk a little bit more about co-op later. For graphics and sound, both the graphics and sound design of this game are beautifully done. The style of places like Yaesha can be very beautiful, while Narude can bring out feelings like some of the darker games like Dead Space. For the vast majority of my playtime, I was solo playing, just listening to in-game sounds. There are big dramatic cues that will help to note if there is a big group of mobs or a mini-boss, which this game calls aberrations. The bosses all have very learnable tells with audio cues, so most of the encounters feel very fair. While I don't think I ever one-shot a boss first try on my first playthrough, I never felt like I was being played by the boss due to the quality of the tells and the audio cues. In many games, I find myself having music playing, Discord open, talking to friends, or some other general distractions. But the audio in this game is both important for combat and is genuinely enjoyable, adding to the atmosphere of the game. Considering this is a third-person shooter, I felt really engaged with the stories and environments, and getting spooked in some areas, while also just kind of wandering and enjoying the scenery of others. In this game, there are a ton of items to collect and find. Some of them are directly purchased, while others are crafted after dropping an item from a boss, while others are found after a maze or a specific order of events. Chances are, if you think something looks suspicious or a secret, it might actually be that, and you might have just uncovered something. Many of these items are directly figure-outable, as I like to say, through just playing the game, while others are completely crazy. One of the archetypes is the Archon, and that requires a bit of time investment and a pretty hefty scavenger hunt to get the gear required to explore the back rooms for the Archon's artifact. It's a pretty interesting play on an internet meme that they included into the game. Additionally, many of the bosses have options that change the fight, with some having 2 different fights, while others having options to not even fight at all. And based on these conditions, you receive different rewards, or it can take you down a different story path. Sometimes it's a cosmetic armor skin, sometimes it's a melee weapon or a mod for a weapon, and it all really depends on uncovering and setting up the alternate boss kills for each of these encounters, and that leads to them having a lot of replayability in this game. Before I conclude, I want to give my 2 cents on what I don't like about this game. No game is perfect, and it really is only one kind of thing. There are some areas that have traps that require a parkour style of gameplay, a jumping puzzle style of mechanic, and I found that these are more frustrating than fun. The game's movement system is kind of rigid, and I found myself not nearly enjoying those aspects as I did the rest of the game. The only other thing is what I referenced about co-op. There are certain items or traits that require co-op to unlock. Now, I personally was able to get it done in public mode. However, I find it frustrating not having a solo-friendly alternative. These traits aren't mandatory to enjoy the game or come up with good builds. It would be nice if co-op was entirely optional without having to forego certain items if you just wanted to play solo. I feel that when talking about Remnant 2, most people will reference the game that they played the most of and say it's most like that. Some people will lean into the Souls style of the game and compare it to like Elden Ring. All of the marketing around the game was Dark Souls with guns after all, which I guess works, but other people compare it to Destiny or Warframe due to the looter shooter style. But I felt this game was more similar to the Fable series, with a lot of secrets to uncover, areas to explore, and items to collect. Many of these story bosses have alternate versions or even no fight versions, which impacts the rewards you get after the boss fight, which makes the dialogue options feel meaningful and adds replayability to the game through the same story multiple times. This kind of branching storytelling makes things really interesting, and I found myself listening to a lot of the dialogue because of the way things go. I wanted to figure out, all right, am I going to fight this person? Is this an alternate method or what's going on? My conclusion is that Remnant 2 is a great game and is definitely worth picking up. And I've barely just scratched the surface with a little bit over 100 hours played, and I fully intend on playing through the various storylines, including the ones that I've already completed again and again. I will be doing a handful of videos regarding Remnant 2 before moving on, and I intend on having an edited playthrough of all 9 different storylines as a member-only video on my channel, as well as some of the alternate boss fights. So if you are interested in Remnant without wanting to play it or buy it, you can give me $1 and experience the whole game through my Let's Plays. With that, I don't want to give Remnant an arbitrary rating, a 7 out of 10 or whatever IGN wants to think, but I will say it is one of the best games I've played in a long time, and I want to thank you for watching. Thanks to all of you who decided to recommend this game to me when I asked about it, and a special thanks to all of my subscribers. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.